You know, I'm starting to be convinced that this Yoshi guy might actually love his job, because he's uploading patch notes on a Saturday. Instead of, I don't know, taking a break, playing Path of Exile, whatever it is he is supposed to do on weekends. Kind of crazy. But anyways, we've got another set of balance changes to go over here, and some of them are pretty big. So let's just jump straight in. As always, link to the patch notes will be in the description down below. Just make sure you scroll all the way down to the bottom because that's where the latest changes are. So let's get started with some general changes. And up first, we've got more changes to Vitality. In the last update, they made everybody tankier, and this update, well, they're doing it once again, and they're also reverting a system that they added back in December. You see, Vitality investment has been reverted back to the way it was before the December patch, so it now provides you a percent-based boost to your base health, rather than just a flat increase. And this is going to cause tankier heroes like Abrams and Mo and Krill to get more of a benefit out of Vitality investment than squishier characters like Mina. So this is more of a power shift than anything that's going to result in tanks getting tankier and squishy characters getting just a little bit squishier. To compensate, hero health growth has been increased by +3 and 4%, so all those squishier characters still just have a lot of health this update. But this does also affect tankier characters, so I mean, Abrams and Mo and Krill are just going to be nigh unkillable this update. Yeah, you're really going to have to start investing in items like Toxic Bullets and Tank Buster now, because, well, that's the only way you're going to chunk through these health pools. Spirit investment has also been changed, so the first part of the tree, at least until you reach the 4.8k investment threshold, is actually the same. You get the same amount of spirit power as before, but anything after the 4.8k spike is lowered slightly, and it caps out now at 100 spirit power. Previously it capped out at 101. It's really those values in between that have gotten worse. So, for example, the second highest value here of 75 used to be 89. So you're incentivized to either hit the 4.8k threshold or go all the way up to 28.8k worth of investment. So spirit power will be really good in the early game still, and it'll be about the same in the late game if you're playing a super spirit heavy character, but in the mid game, where you're kind of at this variable amount of soul investment, let's say you've got 9.6k or 16k invested, you're not going to get as much spirit power from this. Interesting change. And then one minor adjustment to farming, these tier 1 camps specifically have had their spirit resist increase from 35% to 45%, so characters like Seven and Ivy will have a little bit harder of a time taking these out in the early game. Now let's move on to the item changes, and up first we've got a blanket nerf to range across the board. Almost every single range item has gotten a nerf. You can see all the affected items here on the screen. Some items, notably, didn't actually get nerfed. For example, Trophy Collector, one of the only items that didn't get touched by this change, still provides you 1% ability range per stack. But most other sources of range, like Greater Expansion, Cultist Sacrifice, and also Ballistic Enchantment, have been nerfed. So characters that previously enjoyed having ability range, like Lash and Seven, are just a little bit worse this update. There are a few more item changes in this patch. Some of them are relatively small. I'll put the entire list briefly on the screen here. You can pause if you want to read these, but I really just want to touch on the absolute highlights here. First of all, Burst Fire is getting a slight rebalancing. The benefit it provides will last for 1 second longer, from 3.5 up to 4.5 seconds, but the cooldown has been increased by 2 seconds, so it'll ultimately hurt the uptime of this item during the course of a longer fight, but for the brief period where it is active, you now get more benefit out of it, and it'll make it easier to actually kill someone within that 4.5 second time span. Enchanter's Emblem is getting 3% extra spirit resist from 15 up to 18. This might seem like a small change, but Enchanter's Emblem is already a super popular item, and so when it gets a buff that's actually fairly sizable like this, it's worth noting. It now has the same damage reduction as Battle Vest, and it's a pretty good option now for both spirit defense in the early game, as well as just spirit builds who like the benefits of spirit-powered cooldown reduction and also want some tankiness as well. Golden Goose Egg got a change that kind of is coming out of left field, at least in my opinion. It now has a 2-second channel to hatch. So if you just want to get the souls, you have to hold it down now for 2 seconds, and then you get the souls. I'm not sure why this is necessary, because, like, don't you just use golden goose egg when you're about to go buy an item anyways? Or you want some buffs? Like, I don't really understand why this is necessary. I guess to prevent you from popping it in the middle of a fight to get some small golden statue buffs, but like, I don't know, this just doesn't seem like an item that was ever meant to be used in combat anyways. I guess it doesn't really change much in the grand scheme of things, but it does make the item a little bit clunkier to use now, I would say, because you just have to hold it down like this now. And finally, Boundless Spirit got a nerf, going from 35 down to 30 spirit power, which is noteworthy because, well, Boundless Spirit is a really good item on spirit characters, and the 15% spirit power this update is also going to be slightly worse just because the base value of spirit power that you get from the investment tree has been nerfed. So it's a secret double whammy to Boundless Spirit. The item has definitely got worse this update, but still probably going to be necessary in almost every spirit build. Now let's move on to the hero changes, and real quick before we move on, I would just like to say if you've been enjoying the video and you found it to be helpful, make sure you subscribe down below so you don't miss out on future balance update videos from me. But anyways, Abrams is surprisingly getting buffed. I didn't really think he needed any buffs. I thought he was already pretty good, but he is actually just getting complete raw buffs here. So, first of all, melee damage per boon has been increased by 10%, so as you level up, you get more melee damage. Siphon Life has also been rebalanced to have more range by default. The base range has gone up by half a meter, and then to compensate, the tier 3 radius has been brought down by half a meter, but this just means he'll be more powerful without needing to upgrade Siphon Life as much. Infernal Resilience's tier 3 has been increased from 7 to 8% damage generated, and then Seismic Impact is just getting some raw buffs. The impact height has been increased by 2 meters, making it easier to hit people in the sky, and they also increased the tier 2 stun from 0.6 seconds to 0.7 seconds, and the tier 3 unstoppable duration by a full 1 second, so you get 5 seconds of unstoppable after casting this ultimate. Oh my goodness, Abrams' ult is like crazy strong now. Like, look at all that. So, yeah, if you weren't playing Abrams already, I mean, now's the time. He's a superhero. Apollo is getting some gun buffs, so his bullet damage has been increased from 17 up to 18.5, little bit higher of a starting value, and then Riposte is getting more synergy with the melee build specifically. The tier 2 melee resist reduction has been increased from minus 22% to minus 30%. So if you hit someone with the tier 2, they have a staggering 52% less spirit resist. What the heck? Although, the way it's worded here, it looks like you get melee resist. That's not what's going on here. The enemies get their resist lowered. And I mean, that is crazy. The follow-up hit is going to be, like, absurd with this. So, might be worth trying melee Apollo out again. Especially because the tier 3 gives you even more stun duration, going up from 1.2 to 1.6 seconds. That is now a 2.2 second stun by default, ladies and gentlemen, if you upgrade to the tier 3. Yikes. Billy got one technical change. Rising Ram now uses a break-off angle when grounded, allowing upward movement if you're looking up enough. So normally if you just look ahead, like this, you're gonna stay pretty much on the ground. But if you look up, you can go up now, even without pressing space and having to be in the air first. They did it to Calico recently, and hopefully they'll get around to doing it to Shiv too. In a surprise to no one, Calico is getting nerfed, again, to numerous parts of her kit. Yeah, it's almost like when you fix this character's consistency, she gets ludicrously strong. I'm so glad she got the quality of life changes, but man, that made her really powerful. So Leaping Slash is getting a bunch of nerfs. The scaling has been reduced from 1.2 down to 0.8 impact damage scaling, and the cooldown has been increased by 2 seconds. Furthermore, the tier 2 has been nerfed again. It now only grants 200 souls within 3 seconds, instead of 225 souls within 4 seconds, so you have a tighter window to get those souls and just a few fewer souls for your trouble. And then Ava is pretty much getting the only buff here. Ava is no longer disabled by damage over time abilities, same as zipline rules. So if you haven't been shot or hit with a direct impact, but you're still taking damage over time from something like Shiv's daggers or Infernus' afterburn, then that won't prevent you from going into Ava, which I think is a really nice change. And then Return to Shadows, getting some nerfs. The movement speed has been reduced from 30% to 20%, and the cooldown has been increased by 10 seconds from 90 up to 100. Celeste is getting a mixed bag of buffs and nerfs here. Some of her abilities are getting stronger, her ultimate is getting weaker once again, and her gun has also been shifted around a little bit. So first of all, her base bullet and melee resistance has been lowered from minus 6% to minus 8%, making her even more vulnerable to gun damage. And her gun now has fall off. Previously, it did not. So, at longer distances, you will be doing less damage than up close. That's how fall off works. It was really interesting that she previously didn't have any. It made her the best sharpshooter user in the game from a certain point of view, but yeah, I guess that was a little too strong in their eyes. However, her bullet damage has been increased from a starting value of 18 up to 22, and then boon scaling has gone up from 0.6 to 0.7. So, Gun Celeste is theoretically more viable if you're up close and personal. Light Eater also got more spirit scaling, going up from 0.23 to 0.28 on the damage, and then Dazzling Trick got some changes. It no longer grants +1 meter of movement speed by default. That has been moved to the tier 1 upgrade, and then Radiant Daggers is really the area of her kit that's getting the most raw buffs here. So the spirit scaling has been increased from 0.42 to 0.56, the tier 2 has been increased by 3 seconds of cooldown reduction and 10 extra impact damage, which is very powerful indeed, and then the tier 3 has increased her fire rate from 6% to 7% per stack. This is just a really strong ability now, but Shining Wonder keeps on getting nerfed. So the range has been reduced by 1 meter down to 14, and the Shining Wonder tier 3 has been reduced from 10 max bounces, which was kind of crazy, to 8, which is a 100% increase, but still worse than it was before, if you can believe it. They are really trying to fine-tune Doorman's rework here with a bunch of changes to the call bell specifically, as well as one very nice quality of life change we'll look at in a second. So the call bell has just gotten a massive amount of changes here. It now continuously emits a slow by default now, so if you step into this, you get slowed. Pretty simple. Let me demonstrate on Infernus here. You can see that he is constantly getting slowed here. However, the spirit scaling has been nerfed from 1 down to 0.7 on the impact damage and from 1.7 down to 1.4 on the explosion damage. That being said, the upgrades give him some of that power back, and they've also been shifted around a little bit. So the tier 1 upgrade now just grants him +1 charge without granting a radius increase anymore. That radius increase has been moved to the tier 3, which has gotten the most changes here, so it no longer grants that +1 charge, it grants 4 meters of radius now, which is an improvement over the previous 3 meters, and then the duration has been increased by 4 seconds. It now increases spirit scaling by 0.4, as you can see. My ability scaling has gone up here from 0.7 up to 1.1, and from 1.4 up to 1.8, and then, to compensate for this being a ludicrously powerful upgrade, they have removed the bonus slow, so the slow is still just 30% now on the tier 3 instead of 45%. Now let's take a look at the doorway. So this got one very nice quality of life change that we're going to see if you pay attention to the minimap. So the doorway will now show the range of where the second door can be placed on the minimap. So you see this new circle right here around my door here. That indicates the range at which I can deploy another door. So I can't deploy a door over there because it's out of range, but I can deploy a door over here because it is visually in range on the minimap. So that is really helpful for intuiting just how far away you can place these doors. It's just a great quality of life change. That being said, though, the doorway tier 3 has been nerfed, which, fair enough. The range you could get on this was ludicrous. So the spirit scaling has been reduced from 0.25 down to 0.15, and the base range has been reduced from 50 down to 45 meters. So you still get some crazy range, but not halfway across the map type of ludicrous range. And finally, they fixed the luggage cart moving targets that had unstoppable if it went through a doorway. A very small niche interaction, but Doorman mains can no longer exploit that. Dynamo got some slight balance adjustments to kinetic pulse, as well as some very interesting new functionality on quantum entanglement. So the kinetic pulse has a little bit less damage scaling from 2.1 down to 1.8, but the width has been increased by half a meter, and the tier 3 range has been increased by 4 meters. So now you can have some pretty chunky kinetic pulses here at the cost of a little bit of damage. But the most interesting thing that happened to Dynamo this update is that Quantum Entanglement's tier 3 now replenishes 1 charge for charged abilities. So if I use this, you can see that I just got a charge of kinetic pulse back. And this has half effect for allies. So if you Quantum Entanglement an ally, they'll just get half of the cooldown of a charged ability refunded, which gives him some great synergy with characters that have a lot of charges, like Infernus or Holiday. Oh, and the tier 3 of Singularity got got buffed from 5.5 to 6% damage. Graves is getting some balance adjustments to try and make her a little more competitively viable. She has been struggling since the balance update, and let's just take a look what they did. So Jar of Dead is getting some very nice changes here. The spirit scaling has been increased from 0.25 to 0.35. That is substantial. And also their health per boon. Bet you didn't know they got that. It has been increased from 1 to 1.3, so they will be ever so slightly tankier. I mean, you'll still probably be able to one-punch them, but against bullets, especially characters who don't have a lot of gun scaling, they might actually take a couple of hits now. And then Jar of Dead has fixed colliding with the world sometimes, and Jar of Dead Tier 2 will now increase their duration by 4 seconds. So theoretically, you can have these guys up for longer if you choose to upgrade them. This will be most impactful for farming camps and just building up a stockpile of Jar of Dead and then having them follow you around. But once you get into combat, they do still die so fast that it probably won't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Now, Grasping Hands just got a fascinating change. First of all, real quick, the deploy time has been reduced by 1/10 of a second, so it gets out there just a little bit faster now. But the Tier 3 has been reworked, so instead of providing 12 seconds of cooldown reduction, it now allows you to summon 2 ghouls when you activate this ability. Look at that. So, pop out the wall, and then 2 ghouls summon, and they just start walking towards the enemies and they explode. This is very similar to what they did for McGinnis with her wall this update, but in my opinion, it makes a lot more sense on Graves because it really fits into her summoner playstyle, and it finally gives you a really good reason to upgrade to Grasping Hands because that's going to allow you to get more minions on the battlefield. That is a really fun change if you ask me. And then, speaking of ghouls, Borrowed Decree has been power shifted a little bit. So, by default, it will now summon 2 ghouls on cast, as you can see here. Boom, 1, 2. But the increased ghouls functionality of the Tier 3 has been removed. So the Tier 3 no longer summons 3 ghouls on cast. It's basically just been leveled out a bit, how many ghouls you get at various stages in the game. So it's more powerful early, but theoretically a little bit less powerful once you upgraded that Tier 3. They did, however, buff the damage that the Tier 3 does from 5% to 6% current health as damage, which is very scary indeed. Infernus is also getting some buffs, so his reload time has been barely, slightly buffed by a minuscule number, so yeah, that's fun. But the more interesting change is that Flame Dash speed now moves faster by the same amount of speed above your base. So here's the default Flame Dash for comparison, and now if I just go ahead and get some movement speed items, let's get a Fleet Foot in here, let's get Enduring Speed in here, you can see that I'm able to move way faster in my Flame Dash now and cover much more ground. I didn't increase the duration of Flame Dash at all, I just move faster, and that allows me to cover more ground, which is honestly a really cool synergy. I like this a lot. It makes a ton of sense, and it's also a very strong buff to Infernus' ability to farm, because he'll be able to Flame Dash one camp and actually have enough range and duration to get over to another camp, if we just pretend this guy is a camp for a second. So that is a really powerful change to the Flame Dash playstyle. And then finally, Concussive Combustion's Tier 2 has just been buffed from 65 to 85% lifesteal. Ivy is getting some nerfs and power shifts. The Stone Form Spirit Scaling has been reduced by 0.2, and the Tier 3 Spirit Scaling has been reduced from 2 down to 1.7, so just a little bit less damage on this across the board. And then her airdrop has gotten power shifted more than it has nerfed, I would say. So the ally cast range has been increased by 4 meters. You can now pick someone up from 22 meters away. That is actually quite impressive. Look at this range. That is crazy. And the airdrop is no longer disabled by damage over time abilities, same as zipline rules. So you remember what we said about Ava earlier? That also applies to Ivy. Infernus' Afterburn, Shiv's daggers, stuff like that will not prevent you from using airdrop anymore. The cooldown has been increased from 65 seconds to 85 seconds, which is a hefty nerf, but the cooldown is reduced by 25% when used on allies. So if I pick this ally up, you can see that the cooldown is now just 63 seconds, which is basically the same, technically 2 seconds faster than the previous cooldowns. So In that sense, the cooldown didn't get nerfed, but if you're a selfish Ivy who just likes throwing bombs at people and doesn't like escorting your teammates, then it is going to be worse. Kelvin is getting another round of mostly buffs. So the frost grenade radius has been increased by half a meter, but they did nerf the damage scaling slightly on both the regular damage and the tier 3 damage scaling. The ice path, however, just got some raw buffs, so the tier 2 now provides you 5 extra seconds of cooldown reduction, and the tier 3 now provides you a flat 20 bonus spirit power while on the ice path, which stacks, of course, with the 35% spirit power buff that you get from this thing. Yeah, that is pretty powerful indeed. And then the tier 3 frozen shelter now also gives you 15 more health regen, up to 65 now, which is very nice. McGinnis is getting some changes that I think most people will appreciate. So they restored a little bit of power back into the gun, increasing the damage from 6 to 6.2 at base, and from 0.15 to 0.16 per boon. I very much appreciate that. I love Gun McGinnis. Mini turrets attack range has also been increased by 5 meters, allowing you to set them up from farther away. Medicinal Spectre's radius has been increased by half a second, and the Spectral Wall's duration has also been increased by half a second. All of these are nice buffs to every one of her abilities, except her ultimate, which is getting another round of nerfs. I really never thought I'd see the day where this ult would become so meta, but here we are. So Heavy Barrage's cooldown has been increased by 10 seconds, the Spirit scaling has been reduced from 0.23 to 0.2, and the tier 3 has been nerfed from 0.2 to 0.16 Spirit scaling, and from 22 down to 18 damage per rocket. So just a bunch less damage across the board, and you get to use this ultimate less frequently. Mina is just getting some bug fixes as well as more floaty time, going from 2.5 to 4 seconds on the float. Hey, that's fun. So let's talk about these bug fixes. First of all, you can now zoom in again to continue floating if you let go of the zoom button, as long as the time you spent floating is still under the maximum threshold. So that is pretty cool. Previously, if you let go of the zoom, you would just stop floating. So yeah, that feels really nice and enables more movement tech for this character. I'm all for movement tech. They also fixed a bug with Rake with how the low HP bonus damage against non-hero targets was dealt. When they were low, the Spirit Resist basically didn't matter. So Spirit Resist has been fixed on Rake. It'll do a little bit less damage now, but I mean, that's probably for the best. And then they fixed various issues with Nox Nostra bats not hitting things properly. The DPS values have been slightly reduced to compensate for this indirect buff. So it'll just be way more consistent now with hitting the enemies. And I, for one, welcome that because, oh my goodness, this is like one of my least favorite things about her kit. It just feels so bad to use, in my opinion. It was just really inconsistent, so hopefully this feels a lot better. Mirage is getting some improvements this patch to try and help him feel a little smoother to play, and they also reworked the Fire Scarabs again. So, let's start with the Scarabs. It no longer steals a percentage of their max health. Instead, it will drain life from the enemy, dealing DPS to them and healing you for 8 seconds. So, if I go ahead and half health myself here and then throw a Scarab at the enemy, it'll start to deal damage to them and heal me. But this is not the same as max health stealing. My max health isn't going up, their max health isn't going down, it's just regular damage now, and it has just regular damage spirit scaling here of 0.12. Fire Scarabs now also no longer apply a 10% damage amp, instead reducing enemy damage output by 20%, and then a further 15% damage penalty in the tier 3. So Fire Scarabs basically just have a free inhibitor now. Actually stronger than inhibitor, this only goes up to 30%. So that is very powerful, a very strong defensive ability, which I guess makes sense for the bodyguard to have. It does, however, mean though that he will be dealing less damage to you with the Jin's mark because, well, previously Fire Scarabs were amping that mark. So yeah, that might be a good thing. I don't know. I got bursted for 1800 by a Mirage with 2 spirit damage reduction items on me. I had Spirit Resilience and I had Enchanter's Emblem. That was not a fun time. So yeah, that's probably okay. But you might be curious. Can you stack the Fire Scarabs to deal double or triple or quadruple damage to the enemy? And the answer is unfortunately not. So there's still no reason to throw 2 scarabs at an enemy. As you can see there, like I can keep throwing scarabs, and it only refreshes the duration. It doesn't actually stack the effect of the damage, which in my opinion still kind of sucks. It's just an ability that you throw once on someone and forget about it. But yeah, this new effect, I will admit, is pretty nice, and at least seeing that damage tick up over time feels like it's doing more, weirdly enough, just because there's more instances of damage. Anyways, let's talk about the Dust Devil now. So the radius has been increased by 0.5 meter, and the tier 3 window to recast has been increased by 1 second. So just flat buffs to Tornado here across the board, easier to hit on the enemies, and you get more opportunities to use it. The Jin's Mark has received some changes here. The spirit scaling has been reduced from 0.51 to 0.44. They did improve the visuals of the debuff, so yeah, that's always nice. I do like better visual clarity. You actually see a number here on their person. I don't remember if that was there before, but I do like that. And yeah, also the tier 1 slow duration has been buffed from 0.5 seconds to 0.8 seconds of duration, and then the tier 2 multiplier duration has increased by 0.5 second, so a little bit longer of a period of time to apply that debuff to the enemies. So Jin's Mark is really going to be doing a lot less damage this update between the spirit scaling nerf and then the fire scarabs rework, but I mean, yeah, I'm sure that's fine. Let's talk about Traveler now. This has got some very unique changes. First of all, it no longer gets interrupted by non-hero sources nor damage over time. Previously, if you got shot by one of these guys, you couldn't use Traveler, which honestly felt a little strange. I'm glad they fixed that. They also reduced the wait time from 3 seconds to 2 seconds, so you get to where you're going even faster. Take a look at this. Boom, I am already on this side of the map. And furthermore, the interrupt cooldown has been reduced from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. So if someone does shoot you, you will be able to use Traveler faster again. The cooldown, furthermore, has been buffed. They shaved 25 seconds off this thing. It is now just a 2-minute cooldown. And if you get the tier 3, notice that they haven't nerfed this. That is a 40-second cooldown on Traveler. Huh? And if we get Transcendent cooldown as well, hey, would you like a half-a-minute cooldown on your ultimate ability with Mirage? Well, that's one way to make this more interesting. And finally, you can manually cancel the teleport, so if you don't want to, you can just press the button again and cancel it, and it just goes on that 4-second cooldown, so that is a really nice quality of life. You no longer have to commit to the teleport if the fight suddenly changes in the 2 seconds that you decided to teleport. And finally, you can target units once again, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get to target a unit by just clicking on them like that, or you can target anywhere on the map, and both of those will work, so that is really nice. Breaking news, Austrian painter found dead in an alleyway. Moen Krill has been gutted on his combo, and hallelujah. Alright, so let's run through the changes. Combo range has been reduced from 4.8 meters to 4 meters. He has to be breathing down your neck to activate this now. The DPS at base has been reduced from 45 to 40, and the spirit scaling has been cut in half, from 1.2 to 0.6. That is harsh. The cooldown got buffed by 10 seconds. Okay, well, can't all be good, I guess. But the tier 3 DPS has been reduced by 10 from 60 down to 50, although in-game it actually says 40, and indeed the functionality appears to be 40. So the patch notes didn't even get that right. It's actually worse than what the patch notes say. The tier 3 does increase the spirit scaling by 0.4, but that is notably still worse than the previous base spirit scaling. And then finally, the combo health has been rescaled from 50 to 30 plus 1 per boon. So as you level up, you will get more health from this, up to a maximum of 65. But this is not retroactive. So kills that you get in the early game with combo will provide less health for just the entire game now. So if you get a kill and you only have, let's say, 6k worth of souls, you're only going to get 39 health from that kill, which is worse than it was before. Late game kills give you more, but, well, there are probably just going to be fewer of those, and so this is ultimately a net nerf to combo. Combo just got absolutely trashed in this update, and I think the entire community will be out celebrating in the streets. Shiv just got some buffs. Nope. That always makes me nervous. But let's take a look what they've done. So, first of all, you'll notice his stamina is back up to 3. That's actually quite nice. But his stamina cooldown has been increased by 1 second, so those stamina bars will regenerate slower. Bloodletting also got some really unique changes. Bloodletting no longer interrupts sliding when you cast it, so it'll just feel a little bit more fluid to use. That's nice. And they also allowed Bloodletting to be affected by healing modifiers. So if you get an item like Healing Booster, you will get more healing from Bloodletting when you use this ability, which is a unique interaction. It doesn't actually show this on the tooltip, though. As you can see, I've got Healing Booster, and it's still just 40% deferred damage cleared. If I sell this, it is also 40%, so they might need to update the tooltip to make this a little bit more clear. And finally, they have adjusted the Killing Blow. So first of all, they fixed a bug with the Killing Blow Tier 3, causing the cooldown to be delayed if you failed to execute during the allowed windows. So this was forcing Shiv to have a little bit less uptime than intended, and that's a very good thing to fix. But the most interesting change is to how it now functions. You see, you can now pass through enemies until you finally execute someone. So previously, if I used Killing Blow from this angle right here, I would hit the test dummy before hitting Infernus, and, well, my Killing Blow would just be wasted. But now, I can pass through the test dummy and hit Infernus, just like that. So Killing Blow will continue forward and continuously deal damage until it reaches the target that it can execute, or it just runs out of range. So now, as you can see, I have 2 full health characters here. If I just Killing Blow, yeah, I just pass through both of them, and I do that 200 damage, but I don't stop until I run out of range because neither of them were low enough to execute. And then if I get Infernus here low enough again to execute, then I will be able to, once again, just pass through this guy and boom, execute Infernus. So this is a really nice change, and it means that you're not going to be wasting your Killing Blows because you accidentally hit the wrong target. I really like that. Valve realized that they were too harsh to Silver, and so they have given her some very nice changes. First of all, well, I guess one slight nerf, the Slamfire now has 30% reduced weapon accuracy instead of 25%, so you just gotta be a little bit closer now. But Go for the Throat, Boot Kick, and Mauling Leap all benefit from range increases now. So if I were to get something like Greater Expansion, my Boot Kick will travel farther. That feels really nice. And you'll also notice there that I use Boot Kick vertically while still on the ground. That functionality that they gave to Billy now also applies to Silver. You have a break-off angle when grounded, allowing upward movement if you're looking up enough. Yeah, that is really nice. Tail Whack Spirit Scaling has also been increased substantially from 1 to 1.5. That is a lot of extra damage on that now. And then furthermore, Lycan Curse has received a lot more power back. So by default, it now grants you an extra 1.5 meters of movement speed. The Tier 1 has had its resistances increased by 2%, the Tier 2 has had its bonus health increased by 50, and the Tier 3 now has a 1.5 second buffer for kill credits, similar to how a lot of abilities work, like Great Talon's Owl or Vindicta's Sniper Rifle, when it comes to awarding their respective bonuses. Victor just got a change that is the first of its kind in Deadlock, so he now has 30% less effectiveness from lifesteal, and they added that as a tooltip here in the vitality stats section. So now he only gets 70% of the total effectiveness of lifesteal, meaning that items like spirit lifesteal are going to be worse on him now. But notably, sources of healing like Radiant Regeneration are not worse, so that might change which items you want to pick up on this character now. His health per boon has also been increased from 46 up to 50, which is quite strong, and then the Shocking Reanimation has just been changed around once again. So the base radius has been increased by 6 whole meters, and they took that bonus away from the Tier 3, so that's just a base functionality of the ability now. They also nerfed the cooldown again, from 210 seconds up to 230 seconds, but if you upgrade all the way to the Tier 3, you actually get more cooldown reduction than you did before, because that benefit has gone from minus 70 seconds to minus 100 seconds. So that is just really strong. And the Tier 3 adds 150 extra damage to the Shocking Reanimation, bringing the total base value up to 350. But even without that, the fact that the range is bigger now by default means that you're more likely to hit enemies. Look at how big that is. So that is really powerful, and yeah, they really want people to upgrade this ability specifically. Otherwise, it's it's just kind of wacky. You don't get to use it pretty much at all. Is this the longest ult cooldown in the game now? I mean, let's compare that to Dynamo real quick. Yeah, he has the same ult cooldown as Dynamo now. Oh my. Viscous just keeps getting nerfs, but, I mean, the Puddle Punch is really strong, so yeah, I guess I understand that. So, first of all, Puddle Punch scaling has been reduced again from 0.8 to 0.6, but it now has plus 20 bonus damage by default. So, yeah, I guess that means that your Puddle Punch will still be reasonably effective in the early game, but the scaling later on into the match will just be worse. And they also nerfed the wind-up time and displacement duration, so there is now 0.05 extra seconds to react to the Puddle Punch. This is going to make it easier to parry for the enemies. As you can see, that just comes out a little bit slower. And the displacement duration has been reduced by 0.2 seconds, so they don't get knocked around as much. But, of course, you'll still be able to displace yourself just fine, as you can see here, and get a lot of momentum and just carry that on. So it's really just something that is going to make the enemies a little bit less prone to being knocked around, which, I mean, considering how spammable this is, yeah, that's fair enough. Goo Ball, however, has also caught some heat. Dribbling is going to be, well, a lot less effective now because they have nerfed the stun duration and the lockout period from being affected again. So this means that, first of all, they'll be stunned for less time. It's only now a half a second stun instead of a 0.7 second stun, which is very rough if you're trying to stun people. Also, wow, why is my goo ball glitching out? Sorry, I was taken aback by that. It's like, ooh, something's wrong with the visuals here. I don't know. Okay. Well, anyways, hopefully they'll hotfix that out. But yeah, also, the period at which they can be affected again has been increased from 1.25 seconds to 1.35 seconds. So let's say that you have a really big goo ball and you're really slow and kind of just moving through the enemies trying to hit them multiple times. Well, yeah, that's just going to be less effective, and there are going to be fewer instances where you run over an enemy, and then all of a sudden, they're still inside your hitbox, and they get hit as you're rolling away from them. Or if you're really good at dribbling up and down, which I am not, then that is also going to be less effective this patch. But to compensate, they buffed the duration by 1 second, so you get to be in the goo ball for a little bit longer, and this scales nicely with superior duration, as always. So yeah, you can at least be a long goo ball. And, yeah, small consolation prize, I guess. Wraith has received some nerfs. Wow, I'm so surprised. So, the card trick Heart now only heals for half the amount for secondary targets in an area. So, if you happen to get lucky and hit 2 people with a heart, you'll get the full heal from the first person, but only half the heal from the second person. Fair enough. Card Trick now also randomly pulls cards out of a 2-deck stack, which lowers overall variance, and you'll get a new 2-deck stack after that is depleted. It's not really represented visually or anything. I believe just what this change means is that you'll more consistently get a more even spread of cards. Or something like that. It's kind of a weird change. And then the Project Mind has been nerfed at base. They increased the cooldown by 4 seconds, but you get that cooldown reduction back in the Tier 3 because this has also been buffed by 4 seconds. So you're just more incentivized to max this ability out now. The one buff that she got is that full autos Tier 3 will now properly interrupt or finish an ongoing reload. So if I reload and then press 3, I'll just be able to start bullet hosing, which is very convenient. I noticed while I was playing Wraith that if I pressed 3 while I was reloading, I would still have to complete the reload and I would waste a little bit of time. So this is just good quality of life. But from this point on, it's just nerfs on nerfs on nerfs. Telekinesis cast time has been increased by 1/10 of a second. The debuff duration has been reduced by half a second, now just 2.25 seconds. The cast range has been reduced by a staggering 3 meters, it is now just 10, and the cooldown has been increased by 10 seconds. So you get to use this ult less frequently, and it's just less powerful across the board. The enemies have more time to react and counterspell, and they are afflicted with the devastating debuff for less time. And finally, we end off on kind of a boring change. So, they fixed Flying Strike, triggering heavy melee procs rather than light melee. It was always supposed to do light melee, and it does do light melee damage, but it was treating items like Spirit Snatch and Life Strike as heavy melee strikes for the purpose of their cooldown reductions. So, ultimately a nerf, but really a bug fix more than anything. But that is not where the video ends, because, well, we've got actually some pretty substantial patch notes for Street Brawl as well. So first of all, they just improved a lot of enhanced items. I'll put the full list on the screen here for you to pause and read. They didn't explain how they improved them, they just improved them. So have fun with superior items now. They also did some specific balance changes to basically every single legendary item in the game, so let's talk about some of the highlights. Unstable Concoction, one of the silliest items in the game, now grants you Unstoppable as you go in and explode the enemies in a self-sacrifice like that. Oh my goodness. And yeah, this item also has an increased range, making it easier to actually hit the enemies with it. Shadow Strike got a lot of buffs, so the stamina has been increased from 2 to 3, giving you 6 whole stamina bars. It also grants 350 bonus health. The DPS has been increased by 50, and the spirit scaling has been doubled from 0.2 to 0.4, and the invis duration has been increased by half a second. So now, when you go invisible here and then hit an enemy, it is going to hit like a truck, and also you are just so nimble and so tanky. That is a really good item now. Electric Slippers now provides you with 60% fire rate instead of 50%, and the damage radius has been improved by 4 meters. 4 meters! This is practically unavoidable now. 12-meter radius on that? Are you kidding me? Oh my goodness. And this item was already really good. Nullification Burst is, quite the strong pickup now. So the radius has been increased from 12 meters to 20 meters. What? Oh, okay, yeah, that's fair and balanced. Because remember what this does? It removes any positive buffs and prevents stamina usage and healing effects on enemies for 7 whole seconds with an 18-second cooldown. Increasing the range by that much is just absurd. And as if that wasn't enough, it grants you 40% debuff resist. So you're going to be just fine against their debuffs, but they are going to be absolutely miserable not being able to use their stamina or anything. Yeesh, that is strong. Celestial Blessing got a staggering 20 seconds shaved off the cooldown from 50 down to 30 seconds, and the heal has been improved as well from 50 up to 60%, or a minimum of 400 healing. Ruined Gauntlets, otherwise known as Abrams' best friend, has been buffed. The melee distance has been increased from 130 to 150%. Yeah, you just gotta go that far now, oh my goodness. And the cooldown on hit has been reduced from minus 12% to minus 16%, and minus 3 seconds to minus 4 seconds, which is also a buff because it means that you will get your cooldowns back way faster now by just repeatedly bashing the enemies with heavy melees. Yeah, that is really fun. Alright, now check out these Seraphim wings. So they added a new feature where you just have unlimited air dashes and air jumps. So I can just keep jumping like this, and apparently proccing Shadow Strike as well. Yeah, that is just really fun. You get to straight up just fly now. Yeah, and you get 60% in air damage reduction now instead of 40%. So you are basically immortal up here. Like, good luck dying with this item. Cloak of Opportunity got some very nice buffs. It got 2 seconds taken off the cooldown, and it gives you 500 barrier now instead of 300. One of the best items in the game, hooray. Infinite Rounds got 5% more fire rate, and Mystical Piano got 1 extra meter of radius, both of which are pretty small changes, but Shrink Ray now gives you plus 20% fire rate while shrunk. So, you're tiny, you're fast, and now you shoot faster too. But Street Brawl wouldn't be complete without some more hero-specific nerfs. So Victor's Aura of Suffering has been reduced in its radius by 2 meters in Street Brawl, and Hyper Beam has been nerfed again from minus 4 seconds of duration to minus 5 seconds of duration in Street Brawl. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video, so let me know what you think about these changes in the comments section down below, and make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos like this from me. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching, I will see you all next time, peace out.